Hello, hello. I woke up thinking about altruism, and I would like to explain what my understanding is about this concept and what I think it is not, and how it is misunderstood also by a lot of people. So, I think altruism is plain and simply giving to others, giving love, caring, caregiving, nurturing, uh, looking after others, and making sure that they are safe and happy and healthy. That's altruism. So it's a very bare concept, and people misunderstand it because they think it is life is either this or that. You're either selfish or you are altruistic, and when you're altruistic, you don't pay attention to yourself anymore, and that's a misconception. Because how can you take care of others if you don't take care of yourself? You have to obviously breathe air so that my oxygen supply happens in my brain, and my brain is being nurtured so that I can think and I can be altruistic. I couldn't be altruistic if I didn't breathe, right? So, and I have to eat, I have to drink, I have to go to the bathroom, I have to take care of my body, of my physical needs. This is very important, or how could I function? And when I can't function, I can't be there for others. I can't even make videos to explain things. And I couldn't write petition letters if I didn't nurture myself. So this is extremely important. If I freeze to death, then I'm no longer there, and I'm no longer able to be altruistic. So there was this social experiment that was done. Some of you may already know about it. It's pretty famous. Um, Professor Dr. George Price conducted this experiment in England, and it gets very cold in England in the winter time, where he started to give all kinds of things, money and his possessions, started to give this all away to homeless people, little by little, on the street, and people would just take, and they would just take, take, take. They would not think at all. They wouldn't see this person, George Price. They would only see him handing out stuff, and they go, "Oh, I want it." They wouldn't see that he was actually giving away all of his possessions. That thought never occurred to these people. They're so lopsided in their view. I guess that's what he wanted to point out. And it was sold as altruism, but that's not what altruism is. It's reminds me of that fairy tale Goldilocks. I think that's the name, or Sterntaler in German, where the little girl is abandoned in the forest, and she ends up giving away all of her possessions, and she feels sorry for all the living beings in the forest, and she finally ends up giving away her winter coat, and then she froze to death. And but it wasn't explained like that. It was because it was for children. So it was explained like after she had given all her possessions away, she was rewarded with rains of gold and showers of love and sunshine and happiness, and that what people envision as, you know, transcending over to the other side, to the non-physical, and being rewarded with this infinite abundance that Esther Hicks is talking about. It makes me cry thinking about this. Well, that exactly happened to George Price. he ended up transitioning over to the non-physical because he ended up even giving homeless people his winter coats, and he became hypothermic and died. And that's extremely sad. And how can this happen that a professor starting a social experiment ends up getting swept away with this incessant and never ending need in the end to continue this so-called experiment in quotation marks, where he just gets so caught up with what he was doing and ends up dying even in this process, where this process sort of takes on a life on its own and becomes some sort of addiction even, like anorexia, or where things take on a life on their own and it elopes the consciousness and the prefrontal activity in the brain. Yeah. So I find that very puzzling. But that is definitely not altruism, because if I freeze to death, I cannot be there for someone else, obviously. So we have to nurture ourselves. We have to make sure that we are warm, that we're taken care of, that we take our nutrition, that we feed ourselves, that we drink a lot of water, that we take care of our bodies holistically, to nurture ourselves, to make sure that we're well, that we're healing from whatever. We're constantly healing from something because the world is full of pollution. We need to take care of ourselves, obviously, right? We need to eat clay. I just ate some clay. And so we need to not be in pain. We need to not be sleep deprived or suffering from something. So for example, if I had a couple of days of depression, I can't make a video when I have depression. So I can't function very well. I don't have very much to teach or say if I am completely down and out and depressed and suicidal. So that won't work. So I have to first take care of my own wounds, and I have to bring myself back to a level of consciousness where I can be some sort of inspiration for other people, where I can convey that to others, what's going through my mind, and where I can demonstrate also that we can take care of ourselves, because I took care of myself. Yeah. So, and I take very well care of myself, and psychologically and physically, and I want other people to do the same. And sometimes we have moments of or phases of depression. A lot of people have that. Probably most people have it. Most people don't even talk about it still to this day, because they don't want to admit any weakness. So, but then there's a handful of people who do talk about it, and those are our thinkers and shakers. Those are the ones who initiate a conversation about it, which is of utmost importance. If we don't talk about this, how can this subject ever gain any insight for us, on how to improve our world, how to improve our lives? So, in my view, altruism is the highest virtue, and as I understand altruism is I give to others. That doesn't mean I don't give to myself. So I give to myself, I give to others. And so a lot of people will probably they will misconstruct that in their lives because these kind of things so easily get misconstructed. Same with laws, for example. People will misunderstand laws. That's why we have these incredibly long toilet paper roll long um, disclaimers and uh, responsibility waivers and so on, because it has to all minutely be explained. Otherwise, someone can say, "Oh, I didn't understand that correctly," or "Oh, that could be misinterpreted as this or that." So, that's why I have to try to make these disclaimers and rolls of explanations also in my blogs, books, and videos, so that this does not get misconstructed and misused in any way. And there is so much stuff that is constantly being abused by the whole world, misused and and deliberately abused and twisted and and completely with rhetoric uh, sort of twisted into people's own agendas and so on and so on. And religion is one perfect example of this. From what I understand, that the Essene, Jesus Christ, originally taught, this message has been completely misused and abused and twisted around and wrapped into some clergy legislator favor and been completely turned inside out, and upside down. And there was not much left of that original message. And the original message was, as I understand, from various books and science blogs, and also the books by Dolores Cannon. She put some people into a somnambulistic trance, and there were 3 women clients of her who had gone back to past lives. I know a lot of you don't believe in this, but this is what I believe, and there's so much stuff about this already now, also on the internet, that backs it up, and it seems kind of strange and crazy, all of this. But look into it. I really get into it. Look up those stories. They make your hair stand up on end, and you really wonder, what's this all about? What's this soul wandering all about? What is this energy that we call soul? That is the core energy of our existence, and it does exceed our physicality for sure. But that doesn't mean that this sort of backs up Christianity or something. No, it doesn't at all. Quite the opposite, or any other religion, including Buddhism, which is also completely twisted and misconstructed. Not as badly as the other ones, because the Buddha made sure to explain himself so well that it should not be misconstructed later on. So he has all these disclaimers in there. But in the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths and the and just the basics of of bodhicitta and the basics of Maitri, which is caring, giving, altruism also, loving kindness, giving to others, making sure that they're safe. This is the foundation of Buddhism. So because of because he already knew that people would misconstruct it, he made sure to make this very clear. But then some of this had been rewritten deliberately, and some of this had been deliberately ignored, which is what people will do, will do with about anything, that you, if we're dealing with a psychopath, he will twist this and tweak it in his favor, and he will have no problems doing this, So, and that's the worst form of plagiarism. That's the worst form of copyright abuse right there. But anyway, the original teachings of Jesus Christ were because Jesus Christ had been a scholar with Buddhist monks from 13 to 30, something like this. And he has been in India. He has actually taken those journeys, from Israel, what is today Israel, Jerusalem, taken that journey all the way over into the Far East. I mean, I don't know how far he walked, but he definitely has been at some point in the school of Buddhist monks. And what he learned there was unheard of in the Middle Eastern region. So when he came back and he was incorporating this into the Essene teachings, he grew up being an Essene, which was there was a cult, but it was more a school. It was more of a philosophical school. It was a philosophical range of thinking, and it was rather than just, a rigid code. It was a very, very high esoteric school where they were learning a lot about mind, Kundalini, for example, what they call Kundalini today, which comes from India. But they had their own names for this, It's not just one or the other. It is a field of yoga, It's a field of, and they didn't call it any of this, but it's the same thing, what they were learning, what they were practicing on a daily basis. So these women, they discovered in their somnambulistic trance, they went back to their former lives, and they reported seeing and talking to Jesus, and observing what he was doing and what he was practicing. And he was practicing these amazing Kundalini yoga, yogic type of exercises, this mind over matter, control over what you think and what you do, how you act and how you react to others, and to have this at all times, to have this understanding about where is the other person coming from. So Jesus Christ was very advanced scholar in that way, and very advanced Buddhist scholar, and he was trying to convey this to the world around him, and he was way ahead of his time. So because the word got around at what he was able to do, the kind of things he was able to do, uh, the kind of healings that he was doing on people. And again, I've talked about this before. This is not about a miracle. This is not a miracle. I mean, for some people it may appear as that, but as I mentioned before, I don't know if did I talk about this in my video? I definitely talked about it in my book, The Holistic Healing Approach. the ultimate holistic rejuvenation program. That's my recent book, and I talked about this. What I talked about the book The Horse Boy by Rupert Isaacson, and I think I've talked about this before in the past in my videos, but not so recent. So anyway, there was this shaman in England, and people called him over, particularly people who were in the horse racing business, which is highly unethical because a lot of those horses, they fall at some point, particularly when they get older, and they make these horses race, and they fall and they break their bones. Usually they lose the horse, because when a horse breaks his bones, there is in most cases very little chance for recovery, and the horse just suffers horrifically, and they have to put the horse to sleep. It's very, very tragic what's happening with these horrible competition sports that should all be outlawed. So these people in these competition sport businesses, the word got around about that shaman, and they called the shaman over and they paid him, or I don't know if he took money for this, but they called him over to heal their horses, and to heal them quickly so that they don't have to suffer and they can recover fully, and they and for them to put them back into the race, which is absolutely horrific. But anyway, the shaman came, and he cured those horses in just a matter of a couple of days, and it was seen as this incredible miracle and this very strange phenomenon. And Rupert Isaacson was reporting about this. And so Rupert Isaacson, before he wrote his documentary book, The Horse Boy, and the documentary film that he also made in conjunction with that book, The Horse Boy, absolutely fascinating. I can just recommend it to everyone. Before he made us, he was already a journalist and a filmmaker of documentary films, and he's from England, and he had gone to that place where the shaman was living, and he wanted to meet that shaman. And he met with him, and he asked him, how do you do this? What is your exact methodology? How do you, it must be complicated, da 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 da, And the shaman just smiled and sat there, and he said, Rupert, it's just love, Rupert, love. And so apparently he goes in there and he sits with the horses, and he gives them his unconditional love. And see, for me, what's puzzling for me is that this at all has to be such an unheard of phenomenon in the world. And this is what I see on a daily basis. I see this, that people absolutely have no idea about what it is, what love is. And so when you are living in a world where there is no love and just ice coldness, and suddenly there is someone who gives love, then this is seen and celebrated as this phenomenal miracle, this phenomenal thing. A person is giving love. Oh my gosh, this is a phenomenon of epic proportions. How can we even deal with this? Some of them will not even believe it. This is too outlandish for me to believe, He is able to love? Oh no, you must be kidding. And this is what it is. This is the world we live in. And that's why I make these videos, because it sounds like bragging, but I happen to be someone who is able to love. And I do have a lot of anger in me, but that's because I love, because I care. I see the bullshit makes me mad. Do you understand? Can you understand that? So Yeah, that's why I point this out, because man, this has to be shifted. Do you understand? I mean, we need to shift this around. We need to inform people about what true love is. What that shaman was doing, he was just simply going into the horse barn and sitting there next to the horse and giving the horses unconditional love. And how does it feel to unconditionally love someone? I tell you as good as I can how it feels, because I do it all the time. I do it. This is like for me like breathing, or drinking water or eating. It's like not something that I where I say like, oh, let me explain this very tricky yoga thing, or for me it's like explaining to you how to breathe, which I do too, but yeah, people don't even know how to breathe properly. So, or how to make artwork, people will sit there and say, oh, and think to themselves, how do I produce this phenomenal artwork so people won't judge me? Right there, they have already completely undone their entire foundation from even making an artwork. I've talked to a girl in LA. She said she can't do artwork because she has this white canvas thing, shock complex, and she'd be She was 15 at that time. She'd be terrified um, if she didn't do it perfectly. She has to do it perfectly, and I know where this comes from. It comes from her childhood pain, of course. So everything has to be done perfectly, perfectly, perfectly. How? Perfectly for society? Perfectly. Do I have to live perfectly cold so that society can accept me? And then I have adapted myself into a cold society just so that the cold society will accept me. I have made myself cold, and I have added to the coldness in the world. And what have I accomplished with this? Absolutely zero. But that's what most people do. They sit there, they can't paint anything because they have to paint something that pleases others, that where others say, "Oh, you did that great," or this fear of embarrassing themselves. My husband painted a stick figure for me because I wanted him to paint something. I said, "Why don't you?" He can't because he already thinks of himself, "I can't paint." I tell you what, every one of you can paint, okay? But you have this preconception that you can't paint. You just keep telling yourself this, and you keep telling yourself that you need to paint something that other people will approve of. There is the problem. You see the painting behind me? This painting does not give a shit about what someone else thinks or approves of it. This painting behind me lives for itself. This art demands, and this art is my ruler. Okay? This art is my dictator. This art uses me as a vehicle, and because of that, it's tuned in and tapped in and turned on, as Esther Hicks says. It's turned in and linked in and clicked into that endlessness that is above us and below us and sideways. So, yeah. And that state does not know petty little fears of what other people think. My goodness, or I'm starting to get rings under my eyes. Other people will go, "Oh, this is so hideous. I need to go under the knife." So that, and believe me, I have had these thoughts. Believe me, trust me, okay? Just for the last couple of days, I've been thinking about it. And I've been worried about, even going shopping. What are people going to say? Then we meet people and they have much worse rings than I do. And I go, oh, that was a quick reminder. So if I go out, why should everyone look like an animation model? They certainly don't. So, Why should I go under the knife and spend my entire savings on that and have pain and take pain medicine because I've been cut open my whole face and sewn together like Dracula and Frankenstein. What's I you know all of this is that's the same thing as sitting in front of a white canvas thinking, oh, what are they going to think of me if I don't, or someone might say you're weird. I'm sorry, but I am weird and I embrace it and I love it. I the more people tell me I'm weird, the more it confirms. There's this painter, Francis Bacon. I don't know if any one of you know this guy. He lived around 1900, 1920. I don't know when he died, but he was an abstract painter and a very short man coming from a jockey family, actually horrible, cruel sports, and but he completely he detached himself from that family and from their values and all of this. He was completely inward and highly sensitive kid, and he lived in his own realm completely because he lived with art. His art is kind of dark. There's a lot of reflection about his homosexuality and his needs and his childhood that was seemed to be very barren psychologically. So he's depicting this. He's crying it out on the canvas, and he also has a very strong sense of aesthetics and a very strong sense of being tuned into this and being, dictated to. As Jonathan Mese said, he's dictated to by his art, and that's exactly how it works. When you're an artist, when you tune into this, you are dictated to by the art, and the art is the infinite. That is what people call God. So I don't like this word God. It's so misunderstood. I call it blue God because of the blue sky. And I have my own depictions of it, and I think it's good to depict it. Good. Everyone can depict it in their own way. So, but it can be everything. It can morph into everything. It has its filaments into everything. But that doesn't mean you are filled with that. It, you're only filled with it if you allow it to fill you. But you can only allow it to fill you if you are tuning in, and that means you have to dissolve that concept of self, the self-image, this the yank back range, the fear of other people's criticism, and all of this. That has to go 100%, not just a little bit. So, yeah, so this Francis Bacon, he tapped into this and he cried out his sorrows, and he did it serving the art. So, and when you look at his paintings, they are dark, but there's a lot of turning himself inside out, human meat hanging on the wall and stuff like that. And that is his way of expressing, yeah. And there's also a beauty in it, There's also there are pastel tones in it that are very powdery and very, like this here. And I have a thing for this. I definitely, as you can see in my art also, I have a fascination with pastels. I always had this as a child, and I see this in Francis Bacon's art. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up, because he was also very self-critical, and he constantly shredded himself up. As Friedrich Nietzsche always said, you have to shred yourself up in order to find yourself new, in order to be who you really are underneath. You have to constantly shred yourself apart, because what you're shredding away is that the conform the conforming, the confirmation, all these layers of social acceptance fear and social rejection fear, social acceptance need, and social adaptation, and all of this, that happens very quickly. We have to keep shredding this apart, and you have to constantly be burning the self, the ego, in order to come out of the ashes as the phoenix, as they say, the god of renewal. And so he did this a lot also to his art, which is not good, and the gallerist hated that when he was doing this. But so the gallerists, they would actually rescue his art that he had thrown away as good as they could, because they would be running after him because he was producing so much that he had the gallerists and friends who were in love with his art and who recognized that as something amazing. And they would rescue these paintings, and then they would say to him, "Why are you doing this?" They would holler at him and say, "Why do you keep doing this? Why do you do this?" And he will say, "It's simply for the reason because as soon as the painting has become too accepted by other people and too too much liked by other people, he thought that it isn't any good anymore." So he went by this principle of, the more my art is hated and disliked by other people, the better it is, the more in tune it is. So that's that was the premise he was living by, and I understand why he would be saying this, but that doesn't mean we have to destroy our paintings because other people start liking it. No, I embrace it when other people like my artwork. That means that they have, on some level, connected with me. And there was a guy on Facebook just recently from Brazil who said to me, "Oh, I see something pretty in your artwork. It reminds me of some of those cutesy." Like computer animation in some kind of video game. And some other artists who would go by the premise of Francis Bacon, they would say, "Oh, my art is coming across as commercial, terrible, I'm gonna have to shred it all apart." No, I see it the other way around. I see that he was able to connect to it on a very sweet level. And so that feels good, not in terms of being applauded, but in terms of there's someone who was able to see what I'm seeing, because that's exactly what I see in my artwork. That's all it is. And I told him that that is what it is, that you have understood, that you have recognized that correctly. It doesn't have to be explained by some art expert. Yeah, I don't need an art expert to come in and explain. He's probably not even going to understand my art because he's already coming from these preconceived ideas of society again. That's what Jiddu Krishnamurti is talking about, that we should not be doing. Yeah. So I need a child to come in and connect to my art, and then I know that my art spoke to that child through that infinite, to the infinite, to the interconnectedness, to all that is, to the sky, to the trees, to the animals, all that is interconnected. And that means that my sense of self dissolves, because the interconnectedness means we are connected. I am not separate. I'm not dualistic. I'm not me versus the other. Yeah. So, and that's a very frightening concept to religions and very religious people. And that's why they reject modern art, for that very reason. And that's why they demonize it. Because they demonize anything that will dissolve their sense of self. Who am I if I dissolve my sense of self, Who am I? If there are people who identify with their own illnesses, so they don't even want to get well because of this. Because who am I if I become well? I don't have an identity anymore. My former identity was diabetes or depression or whatever it is that people identify themselves with. My former identity was I'm an aristocrat, whatever that means, or I was a queen, or I was a king, or I was a CEO, or I was this religious fanatic, Now, if I dissolve that, who am I, Why do you need to know who you are? Just be. The tree never asks that question, for example, who am I? The tree just is. There are trees that are like one unit. There are trees in a forest. There are entire forests that consist of one unit. Uh, Roots that grow out like a couple of feet further away make a new tree, and that tree makes a new root. It's like a matrix of trees. So that happens too. And these are cedars here. I don't know if they do this. I don't think they do this. But the tree still doesn't ask the question, who am I? Do I have to preserve my identity, and do I have to get a diploma, and do I have to assert myself in society, and so on? Do I have to keep this I concept alive? The tree doesn't do this. It just is. It just breathes. I made a video last night for my mother in German about this. So I think this is very important that we become much more aware about all of these things, and we stop also, there are people who they cling to their unempowerment. They cling to the feeling the Martians are running my life. The Martians are poisoning us. The Martians, they da 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 da. So that's another identity. Dissolve it. Yes, Germaine too. All of you, all of you. Dissolve that bullshit. Okay, you are gorgeous and precious. Germaine, you're gorgeous. Okay, why do you do this? Why do you cling to this? I'm sorry, but I have to say this because this I find this very irritating. I know this is an automated thing, and it's become a collective problem. But step out of this. You don't identify yourself with this. You know, Martian lives matter, and we are perpetuate the perpetuate victims of the others, and bullshit. Okay, stop that shit. This is not working. Okay, dissolve it. You are gorgeous, and and I'm not just making this up. Why should I? I spend a lot of time to give you my love. As soon as I say something, as soon as I have some, share some individual things with you, some life with you, about my life, instead of just staying on the superficial level. I want to share my life with you. I want to be your friend. But then I hear nothing back. So, I mean, it's your business, you don't owe me anything. But don't think for a second that this doesn't just go unnoticed, that I'm just brushing this off as nothing. Because you're not nothing to me. You mean a lot to me. And Mariah too, And you guys need to stop this. You need to stop this identification with being a victim, with being a social victim. being socially abandoned and perpetually uh, outcasted or something as a group. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. Uh, It this terrible things happened in the past. Let's not perpetuate this in our brains. Okay? We don't want to perpetuate this trauma and this and these images. And yeah, and they are images. So dissolving this is probably going to mean, who am I after I dissolve it? I don't even. Who am I if I dissolve being the 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 victim of sexism? Let's say, I'm a woman, so I dissolve being a victim of sexism. Now I don't know who I am suddenly. Like I am a nobody now because I dissolved being a victim of sexism. This is bullshit. Yeah, stop that. Get rid of this. This is not gonna help you, any of you. Right? To keep clinging to this, to the illness or to your whatever you consider to yourself to be in society, whatever group you sort yourself into, or uh, concept you have of yourself, whether it is negative or strong or positive, it's all these are all very sick mechanisms. We are not a victim, we're not a CEO, we are not uh, a person dressed in Gianni Versace or whatever. We are flesh bags. We are blobs of meat. Yeah. Uh, this is a Walmart sweater, baby. I mean, it's like the the skin underneath is still me, Nicola, whether this is a Versace sweater or a Walmart sweater. It makes no difference. I like this sweater, that's why I bought it. Well, lucky for me because I didn't have to spend so much money. But this concept, I have to spend $3,000 for the same sweater or something. I mean, they're probably more fancy with more shenanigans on it. But to spend $3,000 on a sweater because there's a couple more buttons or whatever frilly things on it. Uh, do you see the point I'm making here? All of this has to go. All of this. I mean, if you're real rich, you can afford all kinds of really amazing clothes. Good for you. But don't make it into a self-image. Don't make it into this clinging. I know a woman who she came to my parents' dinner event or something a long time ago, and they said she asked them, how do we dress? They have these 4 brackets of dressing or something. It's ridiculous. And they said casual. Then she came in jeans and beautiful sweater, and she saw the other women were dressed in gown dresses and stuff like that, and she got real mad at them. Really mad. She had to actually, I think she left before the evening was over, and just really angry, fuming with anger because they didn't tell her that it was actually more than just casual. And what is this? No one complained about her clothes. No one said anything. No, no. I mean, what is this? This is self-image, right? Suddenly her self-image got bothered, got disturbed. The self-image that I am this perfectly fitting high society woman who always is dressed to the peak, and I am always fully exactly perfectly fitting in and always the role model of the upper 10,000 and so on. It's a self-image. When that gets disturbed, people don't know who they are anymore. What is she underneath? What is she? And She studied yoga and all of this, but then when she got older, got back into Christianity, out of fear, because her mother was in it, and obviously, I found Jesus again in a roundabout way. No, Jesus, the concept of Jesus that she had was always there, this threatening forefinger in the back of her head. You go to hell. Yeah, that came back with older age, fear of hell. Or I better straighten up and go back to Jesus. After all these years of train of yoga, kundalini, and Buddhism, suddenly, that little Jesus idea was still there, hanging in there somewhere. With the threatening forefinger. Sorry, but that's not Jesus. No, that is the opposite of Jesus. But that's the idea they have learned from other people. And this threat of hell and all of that bullshit. And also, it's an identification. After all, now that was what she grew up with. That is her identification. When she was younger, she had enough physical strength and stamina to explore other routes, but she never really shedded that old image. She never really practiced Kundalini and yoga. She never really listened to the Buddha and and the practice of dissolving the self. So that's what I mean, we get easily sideswept by our old concepts and ideas that we have of ourselves and of the group that we think we belong to. You do not belong to a group, okay? You do not belong to a religion, and neither does the rabbit down there on the lawn, or the tree, or the dog. They do not. My dog is not a Buddhist, okay? He's not a Christian either, and he's certainly not a Muslim. He rejects all of that bullshit. It's bullshit, and that's all it is. That's all these concepts are, whether it's religions or Armani suits. It's bullshit. Okay? That's not you. You are you. You are an animal, a living being, and you want to breathe, okay? And you want to love, and you want to be loved, okay? And you cannot do this, and you want to be free, you want to explore, you want to make artwork without that white canvas complex, without the fear of what other people think. Do it. Go out there. Go to the company and say, hey, I think I fit in here. Why don't you use me as a photo model? Germaine, Germaine the photo model. Do it. Don't say right away, oh, they're only gonna hire Martians. They're not gonna hire me. This is that what I'm talking about. This is that self-limitation. How can you move out of the mafia that throws cigarettes on your carpet and stomps on you and disrespects you? Yes, those are the people from your group. Who disrespects you the most? Huh? You, yourself, and your own group. They all stomp on each other. Dissolve this. Dissolve this image, self-image, and dare to jump into the unknown, and dare to be you yourself. Dare to be just you, the beautiful, gorgeous photo model, and make something out of it, and embrace everyone, from whether they're striped or checkered or have flower patterns on themselves. Whether they're pink or orange or yellow, it doesn't matter. Or blue in the face, as I am often get. So, yeah, blue halo. Embrace all these animals. And learn and find out what it means to really love and really be intimate. Mm? Not the sexual, on the sexual superficial level, but really be intimate, really love, really feel the sense of appreciation. That's all there. That's the inner child already knows that. So be that inner child, and love and give love and stop clinging to that idea that you are a victim, that pseudo identity. Stop all of this. So you guys take care. Love yourselves and love all beings and breathe and live in the now. Okay? Take care. Bye bye.